My guest is Rami Aqeilan. He's the National Director of Canadian Friends of Hebrew University. Welcome to the show, Rami.
Thank you.
Rami, we partnered together this last year on making this year's series on medical research in Israel. Why did you choose our show to partner with?
I think that you've been branding yourself as the voice of the Jewish people and the voice of Israel in Canada in particular. And I think that this was the prime reason. We looked for a very, very good platform to convey message that we couldn't convey in any other platform. That's why we research, we checked the previous show that you had, we looked into the statistic, and we saw that your show is one of the best platforms we could get, and that's why we decided to do that.
I should have asked you this question before. I was just happy. Tell me, now we've done it. You've seen the kind of things we've done. What's your been responsible? Because I got really excited by it, turned out, by doing those interviews with the research scientists. They were terrific. I mean, they were just brilliant guys, and yet they could explain themselves on a very down-to-earth level. They were quite really exciting interviews, I found.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that fascinates me working for the university is to see how science and academic can be tangible. You know, growing up and thinking there is things we don't understand and we're never going to understand. But actually, when you meet these scientists, and they're pretty brilliant one, you realize that science can be very tangible and very, very interesting in a just simple conversation level. And we felt that this should be conveyed to the population, to the people of Canada, not only to the Jewish community, because we know what is the messaging that's coming from Israel, and we know what kind of a battle Israel have in the media. A battle that is almost impossible to convey 5,000 years of history within a 20-second segment in CNN and others. And here we're focusing on the contribution of Israel to the world. Israel have been contributing two major things. One is science, innovation, technology, and the other one is news, but very negative news. And we felt that partnering with you and producing this series is a great way to bring Israel to Canada in a brilliant way, to share the innovation and the good news that's coming out of Israel.
But you've developed different ways of sharing because you have joint research projects, which we'll have to talk about on another show, just focusing on that. Get some of the Canadian researchers who partner with the Israelis and see how they observe it. But we have to finish now. And I just want to thank you for a wonderful partnership, and I hope it will continue, and for a wonderful series of shows that people will see. Thank you for making the opportunity available.
Thank you, Howard.
As the body grows older, it loses its ability to prevent cells from anarchic reproduction. Senescence is the scientific study of the aging process. Can it be slowed down? In politics, there is also the potential for terrorist cells reproducing anarchically. Even the Bible has something to say about such rebellion in the story of Korach. Join us next week for our show on Senescence and Rebellion. My guest is Rachel Brenner. She's a professor at the University of Wisconsin. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you.
Now, you wrote a book on some unusual Jewish women.
Yes.
Simone Weil, Edith Stein, etc. Why did you pick them?
Well, I picked them because the Holocaust presents us with many unusual, unexpected problems, and these four women represent a different kind of a Holocaust victim. We are used to we built an image of a victim in Eastern Europe, but these were Western European women who were deeply assimilated in Western civilization and emancipation, and they never expected to be under the rubric of the final solution. So I wanted to see how people who really didn't even expect it, knew nothing, almost nothing about Judaism, what were their problems when they encountered the death sentence because they were Jewish.
But each one, like Edith Stein or Simone Weil, they were left their Judaism in different senses.
Yes.
But identified in another sense. They always called themselves Jews, but one becomes a Catholic, one virtually is a Christian. You know, so did that have any effect on your choice?
Yes, I think that I wanted to discuss how Jewish identity came forth. It was imposed on them, really, on both of, especially on Simone Weil. Yes. Was imposed on her, and how they responded to it. And you know, it runs again against another accepted version that all Jews consider themselves Jewish and were so adamant about being Jewish. But we see that the Holocaust presents us, if we really look into it, in various kinds of responses. It cannot be categorized, it cannot be put under certain rubrics, and people responded in various ways.
So if we're remembering the Holocaust, as we do in all kinds of ways, and we think it's significant that we remember it, when it's so various for different people, how can you have a formula for remembering it?
Well, I don't think we should look at formula, I think we should look at people. I think what we do when we try to categorize the Holocaust, we really forget to look into the soul and the mind of the victim. And in a way, it's much easier to look for formulas rather than to really identify with the person who was put under such horrible edict of death. But I think it's very important to focus on the individuals.
So does it mean when you teach the Holocaust, like there's a program in Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic now, where they have the students there look up missing Jews, and they write their whole history as individuals. Is that a better way to teach the Holocaust?
I think that I wouldn't say better or worse. I think we all need to know the historical facts and so on and so forth. However, I think the more we look into the life of the person who suffered the Holocaust, the more we understand maybe about ourselves as well.
But it also becomes a political thing, because Israel, it's very important, the meaning of the Holocaust for the identity of Israel. I mean, what's your interpretation of that?
Well, my interpretation is very political. We have no disagreement on that. It's extremely political. I have many doubts about this approach to the Holocaust. I think that you know, to claim the legacy of the victims lies with Israel, to me, is not entirely correct. It seems to me that it was such an enormous universal tragedy that we have to look at it from a wider perspective.
But there's also a little bit of a falseness to it, both by anti-Zionists and anti-Israel and Israel, because in my research, the Holocaust at the time Israel's created plays very little role,
yes,
if any. I mean, it's not in the public consciousness at the time.
That's true. On the contrary, I think that there was even a time when the Zionists were trying to show that, you know, the Holocaust proves that their solution was the solution that all the Jews should have followed, and to start building the new country. And tragically, they didn't do it, but still those who were in the state, they were the ones who were building the future of the nation. So I agree that there are various phases and times of the Holocaust, of the history of the Holocaust. They all reflect what we want to see at a certain point. I think this is my main complaint, that instead of looking into the life of the victim, the life and the death of the victim, into the ideology of the victim, into the acceptance or the lack of acceptance of the fate, we are focusing on us and see what what's good for us in this story, and I really have a lot of problems.
So you think creates a distortion, both of the Holocaust and of our own lives, if
Yes.
you do it that way. How would you do it if you're, I mean, do you think Yad Vashem does a poor job or should be doing a different job or something like that?
Well, I think that in terms of history, Yad Vashem is doing a marvelous job. I think that it's also, they try to educate, they have educational programs there, which I'm all in favor of, for. And I'm not here to, Yad Vashem doesn't need my defense, you know, Yad Vashem. I think that what we should focus on is to discover, to really deal with the horror of it and with the human nature, how to shape human nature so that we will minimize the possibility of such horrors. And I say minimize because I really don't believe that we can eliminate it, I think.
But what do you think of taking students, young people, over to the camps and that kind of program? Anyone who does it, you talk to them and you have interviews, they're powerfully affected. They say it changed their lives. Is that a good way to do it? But I'll just preface it, because often they'll say it's the survivors with them that were the most important part of it.
Well, the survivors want to tell their story, understandably, they want to tell their story. The students in this place, understandably, want to hear the story. This is the perfect, in quotation marks, place to hear and to tell the story. But it seems to me that there must be a follow-up. That this event, if it's taken away from the students' further lives and activities and discussions, I don't think that this serves the purpose that I think such trips should serve.
Okay, you got one more time to say what purpose should it serve? I
think the purpose it should serve is to understand the enormity of our proclivity to evil and activities that will teach me how, and others from my experience in the concentration camp, how I should work against those proclivities. And this includes working with people who need me, working with people who are less privileged, working with people to make them feel better in the world, to make them feel connected with the world. And I think this is the only way how we can, what they say, prevent the next atrocities, because they haven't disappeared.
They certainly haven't. I did work on the Rwanda genocide as my expertise. And of course, it didn't disappear at all. And you get sometimes pessimistic about the possibility of all this teaching and everybody saying never again, but here it happens again. And what do we do?
Well, the only thing, I'm an educator, so I believe in education, and I think that proper education to show people what happened, but also demand of them to respond to it. Can give you an example. When I teach the Holocaust, my final essay, and my students will know now what I'm asking, but my future student, is how did it affect your view of the word now?
With that, Rachel, we have to stop. We haven't run out of time. Thank you very much for appearing on the show.
And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.